남게 타강념의 승진탐배 이건 차자신문 공항하고 가자 디제도 차자신문 만들신과 하다 만화와 술신도 남서방을 지고 년도 공항창에서 두제를 남을 주였다마시오.
Now, all sentient beings, limitless in number as space is without limit, have to gain access to their basic natural state, Mahamudra. To contribute to this goal, I decide here and now that I should embark on the path of Mahamudra to go through all the steps without error, unmistakably, correctly integrating the experiences into my life. With this noble motivation called Bodhicitta, Rinpoche requested we should listen to him.
네, 가동분은 맞아야지. 이 모종도 집에 통도 고민되는 거 말라. 모종 지식이 다 지식이라요. 그는 시간을 남겨. 그래서 만도 제수 이 제수들 동안 지수를 만들어서 다 그들 동안 지수를
To remind ourselves of the structure of this wish for the recognition of Mahamudra. First of all, much earlier in the wishing prayer, we expressed the wish in the way that saying, may I gain confidence in the view that is without any exaggeration or misconception. Means we gain the confidence in how to understand how reality should be. And secondly, it said, may I be without distraction in abiding in that certainty, which is the crucial point of training or meditation. So this process of training and meditation, resting without any distraction in the certainty, we got presented in a general way, in a more detailed way, to describe all the various points that have to arise in one's mind stream during the process of training. And there were three major steps to that. The first was to explain the process of shamatha and vipassana. Secondly, to explain how then, based on this process, experiences and realization dawns. And finally, the third point is to explain the union of compassion and emptiness. This is the last point that we have reached here in the process of this meditation.
다들 동인인지 순종경영은 고버던 바나 당부 인지 모여서 그 뒤에서 인지 대상 동원이 순종이죠.
So explaining about the union of emptiness and compassion, first of all, we will hear a presentation of what compassion actually is. And secondly, then, based on that compassion, how can we enter the union of compassion and emptiness?
로에 정신 따로 상제장 마도 원기 타면 고알참 용암문다 매배 승진라 수면 인지 유라 지워서.
So we come to the actual presentation of compassion. And the root verse says here, the basic nature of all beings is the Buddha at all times. Under the sway of non-realization, they wander endlessly around in samsara cycle. Towards those sentient beings, limitless in number, who undergo limitless types of suffering, may in my mind stream the compassion be born, which is unbearable.
너나 때문에 로와 남지 정신함 로와 남지 때문에 내루기 두다고 상지 그래서나 주연 탐지 예내서 봐 연결 탐지랑 실수를 발레 이나양 루를 지는 엉기 대답도 마도배 덜매배 고알라 누가 못하네요.
Now, it's just a basic fact that the nature, the basic state of every sentient being's mental operation, mind, is like a Buddha's himself. It is primordially without any stain and obscuration. Primordially, it is endowed with all the perfect qualities of a Buddha for the benefit of sentient beings. However, under the sway of not recognizing this, of just being unaware of this basic nature, it happens that everyone is drawn to the confusion and suffers unbearably. So it's actually all types of suffering experienced limitlessly by sentient beings are totally pointless. There's no need for all this suffering, since basically everyone's nature was pure from the beginning. It's only under the influence of fleeting and changing mental obscuration that we're not aware of it. Now, this is the point where compassion really is needed. Since all sentient beings' basic nature is Buddha, and only by mere ignorance, by fleeting and changing mental obscurations, beings are not aware of their potential. Here, limitless compassion is needed and is meaningful. If, on the other hand, beings' nature was not perfect, that means there were real defects and stains, and there were the basic nature of beings, so nothing could be done, couldn't be changed. So what's the point of compassion then, if it cannot move anything? But here, since there is basically no problem and everything is perfect, and only people are in the error of problems and suffering, then this is the real opportunity for unbearable compassion. The great protector Nagarjuna has expressed this fact in the following words, saying, so this very being empty, when the yogi or yogini makes himself or herself familiar with that, gets more and more used to it, that their mind will increasingly long for the benefit of others. There's no doubt about that. To the same extent that we understand that the appearance of this life in the world is an empty appearance, and we make ourselves familiar to that fact, and certainty dawns in our mind to the same amount, then also the longing for the benefit of others, compassion will increase in our mind space, without any doubt. So the next point here is to talk about the union of emptiness and compassion, and the root verse says here, the unbearable compassion, uninterrupted in its flow of expressive power or display, right in the moment when it arises to be empty in its essence, that this point becomes vividly and nakedly clear. This is the supreme path of union, compassion, and emptiness that doesn't know any option to go astray. May I be not separated from this path, and day and night, without interruption, train myself within.
저도 매번 이번 매번 hin지게 잘람 미바디 망가와 차라리 심배 두 대잖네. 되네. 민지 제외 경우 제외 경우 어디 들어가다 저를 이 동반인의 얘기를 소유주.
Now, the first lines of this verse say, unbearable compassion. Unbearable compassion is compassion without point of reference. It is undirected, impartial compassion, unbearable without reference point. Then, now that this compassion, when it arises in its unbearable intensity, is not diminished and interrupted for even the slightest bit, then in the very moment of intense arising may reveal its nature to be empty. There is no substance and independent entity, so that it is not different than from the basic nature, the beyond any concept, beyond preconception and ideas, not different from the empty basic nature.
그리고 성주 고사 칼레 고사세야 될 명사래. 수도 너도 여기서는 예나는 너도 초지지구 시라던 차에 타던 차에 시라지구 되나 시라던 차에 타기니 시발라 공화래. 근데 타던 차에 이 시라되기니 예나는 그냥 공화래. 대수 고사의 자연도 성주에서 동남인이 예는 성주.
So talking in this context about the supreme path, that is the path of union of compassion and emptiness, it says this path is free of any option to go astray. To go astray means to walk the wrong path, a path that doesn't lead to the same goal. So how that? This will be in fact if we practice and train ourselves in either just means without the understanding of emptiness, or we train ourselves exclusively in emptiness without making use of means. If we train ourselves exclusively in emptiness without making use of skillful means, which is compassion, then the final end of that is to reach a state beyond suffering just for one's own sake, a peaceful state just for one's own sake, the state of Pravaka and Pradekavila. And on the other hand, if we just practice means, free from any understanding of the emptiness of the appearance of the world and life, then we will get stuck in the appearance of this world. We just wander around in the seeming world. So both extremes do not lead to the supreme goal. Therefore, the supreme path is the union of compassion and emptiness.
근데 다 동반이 이제 수주의 양년대 근데 인자 sen 남양 자원에다 사제적 호흡도 받는 정도는 좀
Once we found such a supreme path of union, unsurpassable, extraordinary, our main concern should be not to be separated from this path, not even in one moment, thus day and night, without any interruption, to train ourselves with it.
야, 다들어서 다 자위에서 지금 나와요. 그거 뭐야? 아야, 그거. 자위에서 지금 나와. 그네, 오, 남지 때 그좀 더 가면 봐. 남도서 이제 시작을 하면 봐. 처음에 이제 남이는 봐. 남지 영수 연수 못 하고 봐. 남들 탑지는 얘기를 좀 나들이 남들 탑지는 얘기를 좀
그런데
쥐바도 공부 나는 수업 때문에 있어요. 이거는 문제가 나는 게 쥐바 맞은 거 당연히 인식하지. 쥐바는 소된 거네. 그래서는 공부를 듣는데 짜고는 쥐바 다가가는 게 요소. 당부디 남지 때 그좀 줘봐. 근데 또 이게 싫어. 근데 출발하는 남는 남들 양수 연준 못 치고 있는 거. 남들 탓인데 저기는 거. 나와. 출발이 아버지랑 공기 수고 때문에
Now, we come to the next verse, which also is the main heading of a totally different type. And to remind ourselves of the previous one, we were still in the process of that wish that basically once we have gained the confidence of what reality should be without any exaggeration and misconception, secondly was the wish to rest within that certainty without distraction, the main point of training or meditation. And this was explained in general and detail and just came to an end in this explanation. Now the third point, which was saying in the third line of that particular verse, may this point of the training in its expressive power manifest throughout the whole life, in every aspect of life. This is the supreme conduct. Conduct, we don't find any further verse here for detailed explanation, and the commentary says there's no need to explain further in detail about conduct here, because conduct is the natural outcome of our training. If we make ourselves familiar with the basic reality, then the more we understand of that, this recognition and realization will manifest automatically in the way we behave in this world. So it doesn't need any further detailed explanation. So then we have completely covered that, and we come to another main heading. We have to go back to the very beginning of the text where it says the main body of the wishing prayer for the realization of Mahamudra has 5 steps. It is first of all to wish for having the perfect working basis. This was the human body, the perfect working basis. Then, secondly, we had the wish to obtain the intelligence, the power of understanding discrimination, to realize the basic nature. So then, secondly, we were at this point we were endowed with the working basis and the intelligence. Then, thirdly, we wished for meeting an error-free path. And fourthly, once we met the error-free path, we wished for that we are able to proceed along the path and gain experience without any error. So all this path now has been explained in general and in detail. Came to an end. So we arrived at the 5th point, which is the wish for that at the very end of the path, having gone through the whole path entirely, that we achieve the result in an error-free way. So the verse says here, arisen from the power of training, the divine eyes, clearvoyance, to ripen sentient beings and purify Buddha realms. And all the wishing prayers for the qualities of the Buddha accomplished, may by accomplishing, by ripening and purification, those 3, the final end, Buddhahood be reached. So we have found this error-free path here, going that to the very, very end. The result has to be, as described, to directly and completely and correctly to achieve the unsurpassable awakening, which is Buddhahood. And when that happens, lots of other qualities are also fulfilled here and come to perfection. And they're described as the result of the training here as the 6 types of the divine eye, the 5 types of clairvoyance, to ripen sentient beings, to purify Buddha fields, and to accomplish all the wishing prayers. Now, starting with the various qualities, here the first what's mentioned is the higher type of seeing, or the highest faculty of seeing, and there are actually 5 of that, so the numbers were just switched around, 5 eyes and 6 types of clairvoyance. To mention the 5 types of seeing faculty here, there is the fleshly eye, secondly the divine eye, thirdly the higher seeing faculty, visual faculty of wisdom, and the higher visual faculty of Dharma, and the higher visual faculty of the Buddha.
刚才咱们下一位是哪里？下一位が这个大长久三把康熙，那下一位的同学，下面的可爱有哪个呢？有啊，这个下一位是哪里？这张桌的嘛是我的那名人的中国赛，那边的在，就我们那可能不管那这个就跟中国说说，那边的在，但是下一位这个呢？ 박스 야 같은 거 박스 전에 야 얘네 너무 똥숨을 똥숨 못 살아 그래서 그래서 좀 나도 지금 앞에서 그냥 가리고 제가 잡아마도 양념이 나와 가서 좀 되게 잡고 말이야
이 그다음 원고 당마 대지를 내가 이거를
원고 당마 돼 있는 다시 가서 하고 막 지금 이게 그래서 무슨 망치와 되는 그저 망치와 나와 지금 남는 게 중간에서 봐도 전시에 있는 나 보야라 미국에 술을 던져지는 요래서 막 고소. 아, 저도 왕고 열어. 되게 판이 오지도 유에서 들라고. 거의 하고.
Now the next thing here mentioned is within those higher types of seeing faculty is the fleshly eye. The fleshly eye, it's, the explanations get a little bit difficult because we do not really know to say where that is and what exactly it is, but it says that it's the capacity of seeing that it develops and that is able to see in a very, very long distance. Like initially it starts by being more than 500 arm spans, and then even then increasing by a factor of 10 or 100 and so on, to look into far distance. And this faculty of seeing is called the fleshly eye, although the exact location where that is not clear. But out of reading different texts, and gained the understanding that this is probably a capacity that arises first of all by our previous karma, so it's the ripening of positive things that we did in the past, and that this faculty itself is located somewhere near our eyeball, but exactly where to say it's not possible. And also when she says lacking personal experience of that, then we cannot tell us how far exactly one can look with that.
근데 이번에 하이미고 하이미도 다 자신시가 와 자신시 하이미다. 근데 야로는 다음에서 내가 다시 한번 야로 오민게 봐. 짱네. 내 장만나. 오민게 봐. 하이미 컨셉이 사실은 이해서 나와요.
그래서 다들 생각이
전주 생각이 시에도요. 그래도 하기도 미게 다리버디 전주 생각이 미게
la 가르쳐서
오, 전주 생각이 통투리. 다른 데라 하 전주 생각이 통투라요. 쇼주가 신의 담이 치포와나 제와 치와나 제와로서 같은 것도 위해서 가요. 그냥 오민게 봐. 같은 게 통투리에서 말해.
어미지라
제가 쓰는 치포와나 제와 통투리에서 말해. 전주 생각이 하듯이 가르 통투리여가 지금 전주 생각 통투와 맞세. 이등도 주를 쓰는 건지 치포와 제와도.
Now we come to the next type of eye, which is called the divine eye. The divine eye refers first of all to the seeing faculty of worldly gods, starting with the gods of the directions, the 4 directions, then continuing with all the gods of the desire realm and the gods of the form realm, up to the level of Akanishta, which is like the unsurpassable God realm. And whatever those God beings can see in the superior seeing faculty, this is also the field of knowledge of bodhisattvas. Talking about bodhisattvas here means bodhisattvas who have entered the union of compassion and emptiness, and thus dwell on the on the noble levels of bodhisattvas. And those bodhisattvas can see even more. They can see what gods cannot see. They can perceive the moment of transference of consciousness at the time of death of sentient beings and the moment of birth. They can see all the dying and the birth of all sentient beings. We come to the third type of eye, which is called the higher seeing faculty of intelligence. The type of intelligence that is meant here is our own power of mind that recognizes the absence of self or entity. That behind all appearances there is no thing as such, there is no entity to be found, and in particular there is no personal I.
现在去见，去见的啥？这个真不到的是呢，是他们的美术上，帮助满这个舒服清楚嘛，这个去见了。可能让这个我们到的是呢，开出英的公巴到的是呢，上这个多注意清嘛要不？那个那么一个清的多的蛮一点的，他们不会清的是。上这个多注意了，多注意哪呢？多他们的那蛮一个清了吧？那蛮一个清了的清呢，清的什么的？那蛮一个他们不的，清的什么的清的？我们的这个我们的这个是。
일단 내가 이말씀을 때
남양 네 예외 지구 대화 용어도 네 임바당 미기외에 사나 되어진 지구 대화 용어도 네 임바로 되다 보면 내가 제가 처음 친구 생각도 상대를 맡았네 대만 임바당하고 있어요.
The next type of eye is called the higher seeing faculty of Dharma, which means that the bodhisattvas are able to see of each and phenomenon the basic way of being of that and the way it appears, the mode of existence and the mode of appearance. And if we quote the great master Bodhicitta in the past, he has said that from out of the qualities of the Buddha, there are also the 10 powers mentioned, 10 powers of the Buddha. And the first power is the power of the Buddha to understand fully in all detail even the subtlest interrelation of cause and result in our own action, means karma. And only the Buddha can do that, only Buddha is knowledgeable about the full extent of karma. But except this first power, all the other powers, the 9 others, are also available to the bodhisattvas on the noble path.
可能那么的上这个见的吧，上这个见的出他们那么他们就把我们怎么多吧。
对，
你这当你这种这个多，你上这这当见啊，咱们去做的上这个有的嘞，可能你咱们这个做的可能是用过来，但那你长久上班了见啊的用过来，可能见啊的长久上班了呀，上这个见的长久上班了可能是用过来，上了多过用过来吧，这个样子呢，当我拖把，可能打把，可能是不他是嘛是送的，当我长久上班，这当等过做上的啥当我能用过。 可能我是讨论的啥主办的多，现在或者是这个多，可能啥结果呢？是呢，然后也切磋的多呢，可能是不他通过他新的上这个特别丰富。
Now, talking about the last eye is the eye of the Buddha, and is to realize the direct and perfect way the enlightenment of all and everything in this, of all and everything. And this is only for the Buddha himself. In this connection, one may have the doubt that here the qualities of the final end of the path of the Buddhahood are described, but at the same time also it is talked about bodhisattvas. So when the bodhisattvas already have that, why then what's the special thing about the Buddha then? To clarify this topic, the commentary elucidates, saying that here, the initial faculty of seeing already takes place at the first bhumi, but it really fully is obtained only at the 6th bhumi. And from that onwards, to the so-called pure levels of the bodhisattvas, then this faculty is come to further to gain power of insight and is developing further. So the final power of seeing is reached at the end of the Bhumi in the moment of full enlightenment.
俺们是主的对吧？我是主的，可能当不主就我是。呢，一般他也那个东西，说把先生写的东西，以往我呢一直就东西，哪怕他也没个东西，主把啥把什么东西，说讲家他们做。
我知道。
啊，我懂对吧？我是主的，你说。
哦，对，当然。
然后呀。但是咱们尊重就某些啥的，尊重咱们的这样，不尊重就出众，尊重就不能这样。
Coming to the next point is the 6 types of clairvoyance. Clairvoyance are first the ability to perform miracles, secondly divine hearing, thirdly to know the mind of others, fourthly to remember previous lives, then fifth it is the divine eye, and 6th point, immaculate knowledge. The first, the miracle, means that the bodhisattvas are able to perform the various types of miracles. The divine hearing then is the ability to listen to the sound of limitless many Buddha fields. The third one is the ability to know the minds of others, which means that the mind and the state of mind of limitless sentient beings is known, perceived in an unmistakable way. Limitless sentient beings and their future states. So individually, a bodhisattva can say that for the previous lifetimes what happened and what will happen in the future. Now we come to the next point, which is called divine eye. Divine eye is the capacity here of clairvoyance that is able to perceive the moment of transition of consciousness of sentient beings at the moment when they die, and also the birth, and on top of that, also to realize in what sense this is the result of the previous karma of those sentient beings. And we may wonder, what's the difference then in between this type of divine eye and the one that we had before? The divine eye that was falling under the category of the higher type of seeing is said to be the result of the previous own accumulation of good karma. So it's a fully ripened result of one's own positive action. On the other hand, this type of divine eye that is here falling under the category of clairvoyance is a capacity that arises out of the power of one's own familiarization or meditation. So it's the intelligence that arises in the process of getting used to the basic reality. The last type of clairvoyance is called the knowledge, the immaculate knowledge, or the knowledge where the stains are exhausted. The stains are here of those types like mental affliction, the various types of passion and emotions, and then also the type of obscuration of mind that we could call a cognitive error that prevents our omniscience. So when all those veils and mental afflictions are completely exhausted, this is the state of Buddhahood. And then the knowledge is full blown. But even along the way, gradually, to the same extent that we drop mental obscuration, then pure knowledge arises. So this is all meant and covered by this type of clairvoyance. Having covered the higher type of seeing and clairvoyance, there's 3 points left to the qualities of the final end of the path, which are to let ripen, to purify, and to fulfill. Out of those 3, the first is to let ripen sentient beings. What does it mean?
다들 한번 선지 민세야지 들 창조성 받는 남지 탑바도 매배 근데 도장은 방자 방도 용화다 인류의 제로 용화다 인물자.
The ripening of sentient beings refers to the supreme capacity of the Bodhisattva, who by his higher knowledge and skillfulness knows how to benefit a particular individual sentient being in that way that according to the personal capacity, character and longings and wishes and so on, this particular sentient being can be benefited to abandon all the personal individual defects by particular remedies, to know the remedies for individual particular defects for a sentient being. This is meant by ripening sentient being.
저는 신용화해야 돼. 상계의 상수성 받는 신강자수다고 주고. 대양 신강 대양다. 마마가 신강 수를 첨부지가 나와버려. 이는 상수성 받고라가 저는 그냥 유지기 때문에 저는 신강 논의만 그렇게 생각하는 거죠.
Now, the next point here is, by the word, it says something like train Buddha fields or purify Buddha fields, which doesn't make much sense because the Buddha fields are primarily pure. However, what is meant here is the capacity of the Bodhisattva to make other beings enter the Buddha fields. We could maybe say to grant them access to those Buddha fields. And when we talk about Buddha fields, then normally we think of a very, very vast sphere, expanse. But for a Bodhisattva, even in the smallest particle of its own body, on that very atom, there are countless other vast Buddha fields contained in it. So even in the smallest thing, limitless, vast, and limitless big Buddha fields can be contained. And in such way of understanding of Buddha fields, the Bodhisattva is able to even go and travel to all those Buddha fields to penetrate them. And in the same way that he himself possesses this ability to access the Buddha fields, he is able to encourage other sentient beings to enter those Buddha fields too. This is meant here.
저는 상징의 추어통 비용성도 봐. 내월식 그 용진의 추어통도 누가세요. 상징의 용진통도 누가세요.
The last point here is the fulfilling of wishing prayer, the wish for attainment of all the qualities of Tathagata Buddha for the benefit of sentient beings, so that those qualities may be completely obtained is the wish that is here fulfilled. So the bottom line of this wishing prayer is that once the 5 types of higher seeing, the 6 types of clairvoyance, the ability to let ripen sentient beings, to grant them access to the Buddha fields, and the wishing prayers for the attainment of the qualities of the Buddha have been completed, perfected, then may I obtain the state of the Buddha himself.
지당 남지를 봐 중시시나 근데 지당 차를 전부 나는 나도自己这个그러지 보면서 이게 사본이라고도 그냥 한번自己写的그냥 가상 공부写了나신 게 신의 방통을 때문에 내가 싸워 아무도 왜냐면 인생 고유도 줄마지 이렇게 같은自己的된 도람 되잖아 도람 충분 문제는 잡습니다.
So having now being presented with the path and final end of the path in just one verse here in comprised form, it may be useful to know also about the path Mahamudra, which usually consists of the 4 yogas. The 4 yogas are one-pointedness, be free of concepts and preconceptions, could be also called simplicity. Then thirdly, it's one taste. Fourthly, no more training. And to explain what that means again, the first one, to be one-pointed, is explained as the practice of shamatha and vipassana. So when we train ourselves in those 2, to the extent that the experiences, the side effects of the training, bliss, luminosity, bliss, clarity, and non-thought to arise, and that we are able to dwell in shamatha and vipassana day and night without any interruption, 24 hours, then this is called the state of one-pointedness. And it correlates to what we usually know as the 5 paths of the great vehicle, Mahayana, with the path of accumulation, consisting of the lower, the middle, and the higher path of accumulation.
근데 뒤에서这些才能做到的，做到的，可能是吧，意思是在出发的哪时候，可能东南风的速度，东南风的速度是航行成一百，东南风的速度航行成一百，这呢，可能其他速度比那个。其他速度不能说我们其他的做到的，因那样在了做到充分当人有的有这个速度呢，做到全部的跟着同一个速度。
Now, talking about the next yoga, which is the simplicity or the being free of any preconceptions, this refers to that all our concepts and ideas that entertain this world as being an outer world and the inner perceiving mind, this dualistic split, that all those concepts are exhausted and come to an end. And then on top of that, the union of compassion and emptiness is realized. Now we know that the real union of compassion and emptiness only takes place at the first bhumi. But if we take this yoga of simplicity, of being free of concepts, into various steps, there are 3 steps within: a lesser, a middle, and a higher stage. So during the first 2, that refers to the path of junction out of the 5 paths of Mahayana, and the greater simplicity refers to the path of seeing.
为什么？他提出了这个逻辑了吧？逻辑的他得到一个可能我们做法的，我们说呢，等于就他们这土马逻辑的多，就他们土马逻辑的多样的，得到一些的，可能做完以后吧，可能那样蛮高吧，大概差吧，一些的很大的差吧，对啦，逻辑，所以可能罗朗的讲啦，可能对吧？로는 올해 로직라 충무 인증부 참고수 고메 충무 당진 대응하게 상황 되는 거나.
So talking about the third one, the type of yoga called one taste, here the initially gained experience of unity of emptiness and compassion is increasing further and further, and it happens to the presence of primordial wisdom or primordial awareness that now is manifest without any interruption, and makes realize that all the manifold appearances of this world and life are just of one taste. And if we want to make the relation to the 5 paths of Mahayana, the 3 steps of the yoga of one taste, the smaller, the middle, and the higher, plus the 2 first of the next one, the yoga of no more training, the small and the middle one, those 5 together form the path of familiarization of the Mahayana.
저는 이 수술을 다 보면 돼. 그러면 보면 돼. 때문에 람지로 사탄 지로 사탄 마분나시 못했네. 지로 사탄 지로 사탄 마분나시 못했는데 그럴 때는 디바 참모 해서 나라는 거죠. 그래서 어느 때는 냠자 단계에서 이게 상상 시가 되고 냠지 기분대로 냠지 기분대로 또 아무도 주는 때문에 되고 보면 참 보면 전부들이 먹는 거는 되고 물러나.
Now, talking about the next one, which is the yoga of no training. It's the small, the middle, and the great one. Here, the general sense is that all the basic luminosity that is in our mind is generally there, and the luminosity that we train ourselves in as the process of meditation, both come into touch. And this is captured with a picture or the analogy of a mother meeting with a child. The mother is the basic underlying nature of everyone, and every single sentient being has this basic luminosity within. That's the mother. And the child luminosity is the type of luminosity that we train ourselves in during the past. So it's the approximation of that basic luminosity that we train ourselves in. And when this approximated luminosity, the child, meets with the real luminosity, the mother, now then this is the path of no training anymore, where even the most subtle stains of mind, obscurations, are removed. And one comes closer to the time where sessions and breaks are no more different. There's no need to keep sessions different from the breaks. And when both are realized as one, this is the moment of the great no more training, or the attainment of Buddhahood. And in terms of the 5 paths of Mahayana, this is also called the path of no more learning. So we covered at this point here the main heading, the 5th heading, which is to wish for the attainment of the result in an error-free way at the end of the path. And the next verses refer to it in the even more general structure of the wishing prayer. In the very beginning, we learned that there is first an introduction, then there's the main part of the wishing prayer, and there are some concluding verses to come to the conclusion of the wishing prayer. The next verse says then, may by the compassion of the victorious ones, the 10 directions, together with their spiritual sons, then, and by the power of all the positive, the white, the virtue, as much as it has been for myself and all sentient beings, the wishing prayers of the pure type be realized as they were spoken. So the point of that is very simple and straightforward. It is then based on the compassion of all the victorious ones and on the bodhisattvas, and of the power of one's own positive doing. Whatever I myself and all sentient beings did in positive actions, positive imprints in mind that came together by causes and conditions and were so compound phenomena, or the positive that could not be caught and captured in causes and results, which is not a compound phenomenon. But the power of all this may then the wishing prayer of myself and all sentient beings be realized.
That's it.
That's fast. She says he wants to express his special delight about that we were establishing here a relation with each other by sitting here from the very beginning of the explanation of the prayer of Mahamudra to the very end of it. So this is really an occasion for great delight. And just as he himself has been able only to give here a little explanation to contribute with a small commentary, but the basic text here that's used as the commentary for this prayer and the meaning contained within has a vast implication, so we should know that. Now, if we were able to take the meaning of that into our lives and practice it and gain experience, then we can be sure there will be only benefit arising from it, and there's no harm. And even though the commentary here presented was not very extensive.
근데 다 그러나. 뭐래다? 근데 로제마다 근데 누구지? 그런 공간 까봐. 이거 내가 누구지? 그거 말해. 근데 그거 때문에 내가 이만하게 그래서 친구들. 그런 다른 양은 좀 내가 이만한 친구들.
Because Sangye Rinpoche himself cannot come next year, because of the special astrological year, then he himself has the great hope that he will be able to come next year here too, and that we have again an opportunity together to accumulate a lot of merit.
근데 저 시주대는 말아서 뒤쪽에 rinpoche 공가라 아직 많아와다. 근데 굳이 샤베 댄스야다. 고수랑 같이 한다. 만든 거 담지. 사실 투바. 근데 그거 뭐든지 따로 많이 풀지 없어와다. 뭐는 거 보거든. 근데 뭐는 더 소화하다. 역시를 가르쳐나. 근데 그것이 뒤쪽에 생기는 담아다. 뭔가 양전나. 그래서 맞잖아. 근데 샤베는 뭐는 역시
So as it is a general advice, a necessity for all of us being students of Sangye Rinpoche, that we constantly pray for his longevity, that we pray for that his activity may last long with us, and not only for this next special year, but in a general sense, that we continuously direct our hearts to that topic. But we should know that the best method to prolong the life of the teacher always is to take his hard advice and to practice and to gain experience from that.
근데 그냥 이런 것이 손만하시고 세상 대왕님도 창조가 인지 부족보다 지지돼. 그냥 상지가 정주 삼바관계 그냥 세상 사기라야 세상의 문제로 와요. 영화로 세상 사기 지고. 마음속 남도가 세상 자원신 거 사기 중심가구나. 문제로 와. 이거는 끝나고
Maybe if you start in
세상 사. 지금 세상 공청으로 지난번 사기 공청으로 말와. 어디라고 나와서 공청으로 주도를 주세요. 이나양 사기도 정주 삼바가 되면 주세요 말해. 제가 전에 오모 상승 오모 분이시라 돈이 말했어. 근데 돈이 약속 가르쳐나 주변량에. 주변량에야 요라 양량하고 전주라고 했나? 근데 시작된다. 그 소득다. 뭐란다. 그거 뭔가 약속 인송도 그런 거지. 그때 나시 세상 공항선은 사례. 세상 공항인데 방송가 인시 부족하면 뭐가 없어. 인시 부족하면 뭐가 없어. 오늘 약속 가래. 이 투가 나 그쳐서만 사람들이 거기 선만한 이 투기 정확하게 가르치는 그런 것이 아니라 이 남의 거잖아. 근데 투를 뭐가 투고 이게 투가 나 벗어나 투가 뭐야? 근데 봐 투가 나야 안 투가 대박 그런 놈은 뭐잖아. 이 공부하는 소리를
A saying of Nyenpa Rinpoche here marks that very clearly, saying, if made up of gold, grains of gold and grains of sand, then even offering the whole universe in form of mandala and 5 continents is of no use. To take the hard advice and to practice is what really fulfills the intention of the teacher. So for a bodhisattva, there is no essential difference between what we worldly beings take to be so different, like gold grains to be very expensive and sand totally useless. So a bodhisattva sees all this as an equal value. And what's the point and enjoyment for a bodhisattva to be offered all material goods? Doesn't really make any so much difference. But the real offering is that we take the advice that he gave to ease our suffering into practice. And to achieving the experience out of that is what fulfills the intention of the teacher.
저희처럼 저와 남녀의 고용하다 수의남녀의 고용하는 게 다시 말합니다.
Now, just wishes that going along our path, that we may be successful in our practice, and that everything will work out well.